Welcome to episode number 10. I'm CJ Werleman. Thank you for joining us. This week I argued the effort to criminalise Islam is now well underway by the Indian government and its Hindu nationalist allies, presenting 200 million Muslims with an unprecedented existential threat. Firstly, however, a quick reminder that if you enjoy the show and like to help us reach a greater audience and receive exclusive benefits in return, then please become a member at patreon.com/CJWellman. And please also make sure to hit the subscribe button below. Now let's get into it. Last year, when Dr. Gregory Stand warned that the preparation for genocide against Muslims is well underway in India and Kashmir, the response from the international community couldn't have been more indifferent. Despite Dr. Stanton being widely considered the preeminent authority on genocide and ethnic cleansing. Fast forward to the current day, and it's becoming increasingly clear that the situation faced by Muslims in India is quickly catching up to the reality endured by the Uyghur population in China. The comparisons are now just too hard to ignore. For instance, has India, like China, passed laws that specifically target and discriminate against Muslims? Well, the answer is yes. Both the Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act and the National Register of Citizens have been put in place to specifically target and otherize Muslims as second-class citizens. It gets worse. Remembering that a bunch of states have enacted legislation premised on anti-Muslim conspiracies, including the so-called anti-love jihad law, which prohibits Muslim men from marrying Hindu women, therefore mirroring the way in which Germany's Nazi Party prohibited German Jews from marrying persons of, quote, German or related blood. Lest we forget it was these anti-Semitic laws that made the Holocaust possible. Now check this guy out. This imam was arrested after the government falsely accused him of forcibly converting 1,000 Hindus to Islam during the past 35 years, despite not a single person claiming he or she had been forcibly converted by the imam or anyone else for that matter. But under the state's draconian anti-conversion laws, the burden of proof is not on his accusers, but on him because he is a Muslim. In other words, the legal system has been jimmy-rigged in a way that presumes Hindu defendants to be innocent and Muslim defendants guilty. And then there's also the fact the Modi regime has amended the draconian Unlawful Activities Act to label any Muslim or Kashmiri critic of the government as a suspected terrorist, which mirrors the steps China put in place to incarcerate upwards of 4 million Uyghur. Now, has India, like China, established or constructed a network of concentration camps to hold Muslim detainees? Well, the answer again is yes. The government has not only set up a series of concentration camps in Assam to hold Muslim migrants, but has, for all intents and purposes, transformed Indian-occupied Kashmir into a giant open-air prison, where nearly 1 million Indian soldiers control and restrict the movement and day-to-day lives of the indigenous Muslim population. Now, while all of this is going on, you have members of the Indian government openly calling for the forced deportation of Muslims, while at the same time praising the same Hindu nationalist leaders who lauded the Nazis for exterminating the Jewish population. I mean, that alone right there should be reason enough for Western governments to take a closer look at what's happening within India's borders today. But that said, the Modi regime is going to great lengths to keep its Muslim eradication strategies away from the prying eyes of foreign governments and international news organizations by cracking down on journalists and human rights activists who report anti-Muslim hate crimes. I mean, I'm not even an Indian citizen, but here's the Indian version of Tucker Carlson calling for my arrest because I had accurately reported the details of an anti-Muslim hate crime in India last month.
Why is Indian law not enforced against CJ Werleman? No, 1 minute. There's a blue tick account, viewers. People can check it right now. Ratan Sharda knows about it. An account of somebody called CJ Werleman. He amplified the fake communal narrative by sharing the muted Ghaziabad video to his almost 3 lakh followers. He was blaming a Hindutva mob, right? No action is taken because his account marks his location in the US of A. So somebody in the US of A can spread lies about India because the company is of US of A. The laws they follow are of US of A.
This is chilling, given the government has already charged 3 Muslim journalists and 3 members of the opposition party for reporting this same attack. One in which the Muslim victim was attacked by a Hindu mob that forced him to chant the Hindu war cry, Jai Shri Ram. These journalists and politicians now face the very real prospect of serving time in prison, a potential reality I now face should I ever step foot in India again. The Modi regime is waging a relentless legal campaign against those who report the truth about its failures and human rights violations. It's now even pressuring Twitter into banning accounts that report anti-Muslim hate crimes. At the same time, Hindutva organizations threaten to attack the company's officers and employees. Things have gotten so bad for human rights activists that Amnesty International made a decision to close its operations in the country out of fear its personnel would be arrested and imprisoned for documenting human rights abuses. Now think about that for a moment. Amnesty International. This is a global organization that operates across the entire planet in some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones. But it now finds India too dangerous to conduct its operations. I mean, what? This amounts to a nationwide terror campaign against Muslims and human rights defenders across all levels of Indian society and is emblematic of a country on the verge of descending into full-throated fascism, a reality that puts 200 million Muslims on the brink of an Asian Holocaust. And as was the case in Nazi Germany, we are witnessing the radicalization of security forces in India, remembering that the Delhi police officers participated with great enthusiasm in the 2020 Delhi pogrom, which resulted in more than 50 Muslims being stabbed, shot, beaten, and burnt to death. Victims of the violence and their lawyers have accused authorities of pressuring them to drop their cases against the police and of sabotaging the investigation by carrying out raids on law firms to destroy evidence. It's thus no wonder why we're also witnessing an upward surge in the number of Muslim deaths and torture in police custody. Last month, a 43-year-old Muslim father of two was thrown to his death from his balcony by police officers after local Hindus falsely accused him of slaughtering a cow. 1 week later, a 21-year-old Muslim man was tortured to death in the custody of Haryana's cybercrime police unit. The day after that, a 50-year-old Muslim was tortured to death by a police officer in Panipat, which preceded the torture of 6 Muslim men in the custody of police in Uttar Pradesh. A recent report into custodial torture found that 1,700 people died in the custody of Indian security forces and correction officers in 2019, with most of the victims hailing from minority communities, particularly Muslims and Dalits. Moreover, most of these deaths were caused by torture, with human rights groups finding the use of torture to be rampant in India. So this is where things are at the moment. In India today, Muslims are not only being increasingly persecuted under the law, but also in the media and by the security apparatus of the Indian state. One could quite easily make the argument that the situation for Muslims in India is becoming as grim or even grimmer than the reality endured by the Uyghur population. You see, whereas the Uyghur are being persecuted by the Chinese government, Muslims in India are not only being persecuted and pursued by the state, but also by the country's Hindu majority. In the past 4 weeks alone, more than a dozen Muslims have been lynched and murdered by mobs of Hindu extremists. Dozens of others have survived these attacks, but only after being savagely beaten, raped, or tortured, leaving them with psychological scars they will carry for the rest of their lives. Mosques are being attacked, vandalized, and destroyed across the country. And nobody can honestly count themselves surprised, given Hindu nationalist leaders openly call for the murder and rape of Muslims. These calls for extermination and annihilation are also being echoed by tens of millions of Hindus on WhatsApp and other social media platforms. Adding to this raging fire of seething hatred is the proliferation of Islamophobic conspiracy theories. In New Delhi, for instance, Muslim street hawkers are being bashed and boycotted because of a so-called street vendor jihad conspiracy, which claims Muslims are secretly plotting to own and control every food cart and clothing stall in the city. It's absurd. Other insane conspiracies include, of course, land jihad, economic jihad, media jihad, government jihad, jobs jihad, and of course, corona jihad, which alleges Muslims secretly spread the coronavirus to take over the country. While these separate events on their own do not amount to genocide, what is clear is that the 2020s have come to represent the decade of living dangerously for 200 million Muslims in India, and the international community must take note before it's too late. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe to this channel and help spread the word with your family, friends on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And a final reminder to consider supporting this endeavor by becoming a member of this show at patreon.com/CJ Werleman. But for now, good night, good morning, or good day, wherever you are, and stay blessed.